I was born in Brooklyn, New York, and I often say BC, before computer and before cell phone. My parents were in the business world, and both of them, and my grandparents on both sides were involved in ministry. My brother, James L., he's also in full-time ministry, and our both first names are James. When my brother and I were born, my parents didn't have a creative moment. They just named us both one name, but we're named after two different grandfathers. His middle initial was L, and the other grandfather's middle initial was O, and that's how we became James O and James L. In high school, and especially in college, sometimes we would switch classes, especially when one particular gentleman taught history, and we'd only have classes 2 days a week at the university, and my brother and I took the same class. It was on Tuesdays and Thursdays, and so he would go on one day, and I would go on the other day, and we would share the notes, but it saved us half of our school time. I came to Christ July 15th, 1973, on a Sunday morning in Montgomery, Alabama, and I was sitting halfway back with my parents. I was the only person who responded to the invitation, and I went down front as a 12-year-old boy, and I knelt, and I knew that Christ had come into my heart. And I remember standing and seeing 5 men standing behind me, and one of them was my dad. And I knew that on that morning, Christ had come into my heart. And that was 45 years ago. As a result of that, very much involved in the church, and became a leader in the local church. And I began preaching when I was 18, right out of graduating from high school. August 19th, 1979 was the very first sermon I ever preached. And from that beginning point of August of 1979 until today, I'm grateful to be able to tell you that I've never wavered on this. This has been this one thing I do. My doctorate is in preaching. I'm not saying I'm the best. I want to be the best I can be. To fill that sacred desk. A friend of mine who's now with the Lord used to tell me, you know, you fill the pulpit, expect God to fill the building. In other words, I take care of me getting ready and expect God to do the rest of it. And that has been our focus from that day to the day. Well, you know, if you're no threat to the devil, you won't ever have an attack, right? So the reverse of that is if you are a threat to him, you will have. In the 1990s, my wife and I, we buried 2 children. We buried one in 1991, one in 1998. They're buried in Springfield, Missouri. The first was our little girl, the second was our son. And I'm not saying that's an attack of the enemy. I'm saying that's just an attack in life. You know, sometimes we blame things on the devil that he didn't do. Sometimes we do it. Sometimes it's just life. And we don't have to spiritualize it, yet there's a spiritual lesson from it. I remember one time was complaining to the Lord. And it was late at night. It was around midnight. We were living in Springfield, Missouri. I was downstairs in my study, and so I was complaining, and I was saying, Lord, you know, there seems like there's never enough money to do the ministry that you've called us to, and I was really letting him have it, and so I felt like the Lord whispered to me in this dialogue, and he said this to me. He said, people with vision never have enough money. And then he whispered something else to me, and he said, people who do not have vision don't need the money. So I've learned to live with a tension between vision, provision. So that God gives you vision, gives me vision, gives our viewers vision, but at the same time, how fast do you go with the vision? And to make sure provision is coming alongside a vision. You know, when the late Dr. Bill Bright and I began the network, he was an extraordinary, visionary, focused leader, and he and I became very close friends. We came from totally 2 different streams of Christianity. I came from a Pentecostal background, he came from a Presbyterian background, and we were just like father, son. It was a wonderful relationship. And it was in that time that we launched the network, 0102, right here in Orlando, Florida. And the Lord blessed it. And we had over 5,000 pastors and leaders come to First Baptist here in Orlando. And the network was launched there. And from that day to the day, the Lord has blessed the network, and the network has really grown and has become, I think, a dominant force in Christendom today. I don't say that because I've been a part of it. I'm just saying I see what's going on. I know what's happening, and I'm grateful for it. And so the Global Church Network is focused on synergizing and mobilizing the body of Christ toward the fulfillment of the Great Commission. Doesn't mean that we're the only ones doing that. It just means that that's what the network exists for. I tell people everywhere I go, if you're not networking, eventually you'll be not working, because that is the way we get to the finish line. No great race is done by a single person all by him or herself. And there comes a time where you got to start reaching out. The late Dr. Bill Bright used to say it this way: it's not about egos and it's not about logos. It's about finishing the Great Commission. In other words, you got to get your ego out of the way, you got to get your logo out of the way, and start focusing on what really matters. Well, you can go to Billion, BILLION.TV, Billion.TV, and across the top is a bar that has souls been saved and churches planted in the Billion Soul Initiative that we've been going on since September of 2005. But we're gradually moving from that now to the finish line, that we really want to help everybody to get to the finish line. It is possible, but we're going to have to do it together.
The Global Church Network is made up of key leaders from around the world who have committed to finishing this race in this generation.